Hey everyone, it's Jen with Spirited Saturdays, and this week we're talking about knowing and respecting limits. I definitely have a lot of experience with this on both ends of the limit setting continuum, and I've had to do a lot of work to really try to make this a little more second nature. And so I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that I've learned and continue to practice, and just some questions that I've asked myself about this and things I've had to think about in order to really face this head on. So first of all, I think that often with eating disorders, people tend to impose extreme limits on themselves and at the same time abandon limits as they apply to others. So, there's a huge discrepancy there, and that often comes from a lack of self-worth or identity. And I think that because of that lack of self-worth and lack of feeling of identity, we place our value on what we can do, what we can achieve, how we can perform, how we can appease others. And often, since there's this blurry and inaccurate vision of who we are, we can only really gauge who we are, how well we're doing, our value, our self-worth, by the reactions of others, and how others may think we're doing, how good or how bad we are. We can only use those external markers, and just in the same way, we often use external markers like the scale. So, for example, we might say, if I do an amazing research paper, I will be liked, valued, regarded in high esteem. But this doesn't work on a couple levels. First of all, what is good to you may be, or what's just okay to you might be great to someone else, but you'll never realize that. So you'll never realize that it actually is great. And you'll never reach greatness because the standard is too high. And so the worth is never actualized. And the other reason that's not always effective is because just as you can have a good research paper if you get an A, and okay, well, that means it's a good paper, okay, it means it's a great paper. What happens the next time you do a research paper and you get a C? All of a sudden you're bad, all of a sudden, that doesn't, these things are very conditional. They don't determine who you are as a person. And so, we take that and then we use the eating disorder to cope with it, because it's really difficult to keep that up to, feels like you're just being tossed in the wind, every time it changes. So some questions that I've asked myself and would like to put out there to others. So how is it that these limits are justifiable to ourselves but not others? And why is it okay to place such high and cruel demands on ourselves, but not others? The same demands that we would deem unthinkable to place on someone else. Why is it okay to compromise ourselves for another? And I know these are things that you think about, logically, that they don't make sense, but I still think it's good to ask, because the more you ask, the more you come into the picture, the less time and energy and opportunity you give to that irrational, that eating disorder voice. And so you have to, what I try to do is be present as much as possible and really state my own beliefs, really question the eating disorder rationale as much as possible, challenge it, and just know that your voice is counting. And you often have to say things 10 times louder than the eating disorder voice just to break even. So I think that it's very important to reinforce the healthy voices as much as possible, without obsessing over it, obviously. But remember that that's worth a lot. So perhaps we adhere to self-imposed abuse because we don't feel worthy of compassion and kindness. But by the same token, we do when we do for others. And personally, this is for several reasons. One, I felt that others were worthy of compassion and kindness. Why them and not me? I don't know. But well, I'm sure I know, but this was one of the reasons that I felt others were more worthy of compassion and kindness than I was. Another reason is that I've idealized others. I've put others up on a pedestal and have seen them as all good. Not even all good or all bad, just all good. And they can do no wrong. So they're obviously deserving of compassion and kindness and wonderfulness, and sure, I'll do anything for you, and maybe you'll like me more if I do more and more for you, you know? So there's that, which is like the result of me feeling this small. And on that same token, I have determined my worth by how much I could do for others. So unfortunately, worth becomes totally conditional in this way. As quickly as you deem yourself good, you could turn on a dime and be bad. Because, all because you maybe got a question right or wrong, or you made a mistake when you did something once, but you didn't make that mistake the next time. So eventually we run out of steam because we, hopefully realize that the system is unsustainable. There needs to be a backbone. There needs to be a basic core sense of self-respect, a belief that no matter how little or how much we do for others, there remains this unconditional respect, confidence, acceptance of ourselves. And I think first, so recognizing when something is becoming too much is very important here. In that moment, when we feel like something isn't right, like we're draining ourselves of our energy in order to prioritize someone else, we have to pause. We owe it to ourselves. We are allowed to take that break. We have the right and the freedom to stop in the middle of a conversation and assess how we're feeling and express that to the other person without fear of being judged. We have a right to say no when someone asks a favor of us. And we don't need to justify that. Not every moment of the day needs to be occupied with doing something. So it's okay to say no, even when you don't have something in particular planned in that specific time slot. If you're finding that doing this favor for somebody else would occupy the only free moment in your day, that time spent just being is something. It counts, and it ought to be carved out. It ought to be given precedence. Also, we reserve the right not to feel guilty if we don't respond to an email or a phone call right away. If someone we value wants to hear back from us, we owe it to them and to ourselves to ground ourselves before we call, before we message. So include a deep breath as part of your time. Don't regard it as something extra or a luxury or a privilege. I mean, regard it as an obligation to yourself. I mean, it is a privilege, but regard it as an obligation because it's going to make for a more grounded and centered place from which to have the conversation or write the message. Just like a dancer includes their warm-up time in their practice, makes time for that, include a necessary grounding or debriefing time into your day so you can function from the most relaxed and grounded place that you can. Dialectical behavioral therapy teaches self-respect, and it talks about interacting with others while maintaining your self-respect without compromising your self-respect. And I took a lot from this, so I'll put a link to that below. Often in eating disorders, we stretch that line so thin, that line of what is acceptable to give, how much of ourselves we can give, how little space can I take up, but how much of myself can I disperse to others or lend or give to others. We seek to occupy every minute of the day sometimes just so that we don't have to be inside of ourselves. And so grounding ourselves, taking the time, taking deep breaths, just hanging out without distraction and without obligation can integrate you and can integrate us back into ourselves. It can connect us to our body and minds internal cues, and it can give us the strongest and steadiest base with which to move forward. So I hope that you have good luck practicing that, and any questions, feel free to ask me or anyone here, and I hope you have a great week. All right, take care. Bye.